So I want you to just imagine for a second packing up the most vital, irreplaceable treasures of your entire civilization.
Right. And we're not just talking about like gold reserves here or crown jewels.
No, no, exactly. We are talking about your entire recorded history,
Mhm.
your collective intelligence, the absolute pinnacle of your scientific achievements.
The literal physical guiding leadership of your species.
Yeah. Now imagine taking all of that, ripping it out of the bedrock of a heavily fortified homeworld, packing it into a fleet of ships, and choosing, like willingly choosing to drive that fleet endlessly into the darkest, most dangerous, unexplored reaches of the galaxy.
Sounds like absolute madness.
It really does.
Yeah.
But that is exactly what the Trans-Hyperian Alliance has done. And today, we are going to look at the catastrophic toll that this endless voyage takes on their people, because we are looking at a society that has entirely redefined the concept of survival.
Yeah, welcome to the deep dive, everyone, because it really is a premise that completely upends everything you might think you know
Right.
about how an empire is supposed to function.
Right.
The Trans-Hyperian Alliance, which is a specific faction of the kin within the broader leagues of Votan, they challenge the very concept of, home.
Yeah, they really do.
We are looking at a scattered, star-faring collective that has basically traded stability for perpetual motion. And to truly grasp the madness and the hidden brilliance of this choice, we really have to look at how violently this diverges from the baseline psychology of their own species.
Right, because if you are familiar with the kin at all, you know that their defining cultural trait is, well, caution.
Extreme caution.
Yeah, they are methodical. They are the ultimate industrialists, the master miners.
Unmatched.
Their entire civilization is built on this idea of finding a resource-rich planet, digging deep into the crust, building these impossibly sturdy subterranean holds, and just daring the rest of the galaxy to try and dig them out.
Exactly. They rely on heavy armor, overwhelming pragmatic firepower, and static defense. They do not do, like, flighty.
No, not at all. But the Trans-Hyperian Alliance throws that entire playbook straight out the airlock.
They really do.
They are described as the peerless explorers and adventurers of the kin. They have this obsessive determination to constantly push outward, seeking new warp routes and uncovering mysteries.
Right, and it is a profound structural and psychological overhaul of an entire species' baseline behavior.
Hmm.
I mean, they have taken the methodical, stubborn nature of the kin and applied it not to defending a static fortress, but to mastering the infinite chaos of the void.
I was actually trying to conceptualize just how radical a shift this is. It is like, okay, imagine taking a society entirely composed of conservative, risk-averse accountants.
Okay, I like this.
Right. People who thrive on predictability, routine, secure investments. And one day, an entire demographic of them decides to become deep-sea trench diving explorers.
Oh, wow.
They
Yeah.
trade the safety of the cubicle for the crushing pressure of the Mariana Trench, but they apply that exact same accountant-level obsession to mapping the abyssal dark.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
They don't become reckless adrenaline junkies, right? They become methodical masters of a lethal environment. But logically, I just have to wonder, how does a culture even survive that kind of inversion? Because if your entire empire is nomadic, you are inherently thinly spread.
That is the logistical nightmare they have chosen to embrace. I mean, the Trans-Hyperian Alliance controls vast territories, spanning both inside and outside the galactic core.
Right.
But because they are constantly on the move, these holdings are isolated. The fundamental building block of kin society is the kindred.
Right. Yeah, the extended familial and genetic groupings.
Exactly, the groupings that define their loyalties and their culture. So, in a standard league, multiple kindreds might share a heavily fortified star system.
They can back each other up.
Right. But in the Alliance, these kindreds dwell in tiny, isolated pockets, or they live their entire lives aboard nomadic fleets that might not see another kin vessel for, like, decades.
Which fundamentally breaks how a civilization maintains its cohesion.
It absolutely should.
If your population is scattered across a galaxy that is, let's be honest, actively tearing itself apart, how do you prevent cultural drift? If you have a kindred born on a fleet navigating the eastern fringe and another mining an asteroid on the western fringe, separated by thousands of light years of warp storms and hostile territory, how do they even recognize each other as the same people a century later?
Yeah.
Usually, a scattered empire fractures, dialects shift, loyalties fade, and eventually they stop seeing each other as allies.
And that would absolutely happen if their identity were tied to a physical place.
Ah.
But the Alliance has done something remarkable here. They have anchored their cultural identity entirely to the act of movement itself.
Okay, that's interesting.
The nomadic lifestyle is the unifier. Their shared culture is the shared trauma and triumph of exploration.
Wow.
However, you are entirely correct that this presents a massive, massive operational vulnerability. If everyone is scattered and there is no capital world, where is the central authority?
Exactly. Where is the guiding intelligence that keeps all these disparate fleets operating toward a unified goal?
And this is where we hit the most radical departure from kin norms. And frankly, the part that sounds like sheer tactical suicide.
Yeah, it really does.
Uniquely among all the major leagues, the Trans-Hyperian Alliance has taken their 3 Votan ancestor cores and made them entirely void-faring.
Which, for anyone not deep in the lore, is just an astonishing detail.
It is wild.
The Votan are not just supercomputers. They are ancient, sentient cogitators that hold the genetic data, the accumulated wisdom, and the digitized souls of the kin's ancestors.
They are their gods.
Literally, they are the Library of Alexandria, the genetic forge, and the Supreme Leader all rolled into a giant glowing machine.
Right?
And the Alliance has ripped them out of the ground, nestled them deep inside highly fortified spaceships, and put them in constant motion.
Yep.
I have to push back on the logic here, though.
Oh, I'm sure you do.
Because putting your civilization's most irreplaceable asset on a moving target in a galaxy, this hostile feels like utter madness. It's like putting a nation's gold reserve, constitution, and best scientists in a single armored truck and driving it through a war zone.
It is a massive risk. I mean, you are not wrong.
If that ship suffers a catastrophic warp drive failure or gets ambushed by a superior fleet, your civilization doesn't just lose a leader, it loses its mind, its history, and its ability to clone new generations. It is gone, just erased.
It is a terrifying prospect. But you are analyzing this through the lens of static defense, which is exactly the mindset the Alliance has completely abandoned.
Fair.
The grim reality of this universe is that static targets eventually fall. It does not matter how thick your void shields are.
Or how deep into a planet's mantle you bury your ancestor core.
Exactly. If the enemy, whether that's a Black Crusade or a Hive Fleet, if they know exactly where you are, they can amass enough bodies and firepower to eventually break the siege. It is just math.
Right. Attrition always wins if they know where to hit.
So the Alliance looked at that inevitability and decided that obscurity is a far stronger shield than adamantium. Constant motion is their armor.
So the calculation is basically, if they can't find our god, they can't kill our god.
Precisely. The vastness of space is the ultimate fortress.
All right.
But, as you rightly deduced earlier, this creates an immediate, severe communication problem.
Oh, massive.
If the Votan is constantly changing coordinates to evade detection, how do the scattered kin fleets actually find it? They need to deposit their gathered data, they need to consult the ancestors, and they need to acquire new genetic templates.
Yeah, how do you maintain a lifeline to a god that is actively hiding from you?
Exactly. And to solve this, kin engineers rely on the Scrambled Knowledge Protocol, which is applied to their fanes, the localized shrines or terminals that connect a kindred back to their Votan.
I want to dig into the mechanics of this protocol because it is fascinating.
Oh, it really is.
Ancient, hyper-advanced technologies ensure that these fanes are constantly, dynamically updated with the exact coordinates of the void-faring ancestor cores.
Right.
But a fane is a physical terminal.
Well,
If a colony falls or a ship is boarded and captured, that terminal falls into enemy hands.
exactly.
Therefore, the coordinate data streaming into the fane is deeply, profoundly encrypted. And I was thinking about how this encryption must actually function because a standard mathematical cipher just wouldn't be enough.
No, not in this galaxy.
Right. If you capture a terminal, a sufficiently advanced intellect, like an AI or a demon, could eventually brute force a math problem.
Yeah, give them enough time and they'll crack it.
But the Scrambled Knowledge Protocol creates something that looks like pure digital white noise to anyone else. It's not just a password. It has to be like a biosympathetic quantum cipher.
That is a great way to describe it.
The static isn't just a hidden code. It's raw, entangled data that only coalesces into a readable map if it is interfaced with the specific cloned biological signature of a kin from that specific league.
That is exactly the mechanism at play here. The encryption relies on the inherent biological and cultural cipher ingrained in the kin themselves. To an outsider, it is screaming, incomprehensible static.
Just picture the reality of that for an enemy boarding party. Let's say an inquisitorial strike team breaches a kin vessel.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They take horrific casualties fighting through the corridors. Half their squad is vaporized by magna rail fire.
The bloodbath.
Total bloodbath.
Oh.
They finally breach the inner sanctum, secure the Fane, and plug their data thieves into the terminal, fully expecting to download the location of the kin's most valuable asset.
And all they get is garbage data.
Exactly.
Right.
They have bled and died for a terminal that is fundamentally useless to them because they don't have the DNA to read it.
Meanwhile, a kin operative can walk up to that exact same terminal, look at the exact same white noise, and instinctively perceive the breadcrumb trail leading through the warp to their Votan.
It is a flawless failsafe.
It really is.
Yeah.
But we have to consider the psychological weight of this system. Maintaining this cryptographic lifeline and protecting these moving cores requires a populace that is held in a state of constant extreme vigilance.
Oh, absolutely.
They are forever paving the way for their gods through the most dangerous fringes of space.
Which brings us perfectly to the physical and mental toll this takes on the population. Because you cannot maintain a constantly moving, galaxy-spanning fleet of armored super trucks without paying a massive price.
No, you can't.
The Alliance is explicitly described in the lore as living a strung-out existence. They are perpetually under strength, constantly fighting against overwhelming odds, and spread razor-thin across the void.
Strung out is really the perfect term for it. They do not have the luxury of deep reserves or massive reinforcement fleets. Every expedition, every mining operation, every defensive action is operating on the absolute bleeding edge of their logistical capacity.
Which has to be exhausting.
Oh, incredibly. And yet the most fascinating aspect of their psychology is that they relish this hardship.
Right. They love it.
They actively lean into the asymmetry of their existence. And the prime example of this mentality is found in their reliance on the Hernkin pioneers.
So in standard kin society, the Hernkin pioneers are the frontiersmen. They are the rangers, the scouts who strike out ahead of the main fleets to map warp routes and assess threats.
Right.
But for the Trans-Hyperian Alliance, the Hunkin aren't just a specialized military branch. They are the cultural baseline.
To really understand the Alliance, you have to understand the sociological impact of the Hernkin lifestyle. We have a very specific structural example of this in the lore regarding Ukalak's kindred.
Oh, right, the 10-year rule.
Exactly. Within that specific group, it is a mandatory rite of passage that every single kin must serve at least a full Terran decade as a Hernkin pioneer during their early years.
A decade.
10 years, operating in small, isolated bands on the most hostile fringe worlds before they are considered a full, integrated member of the society.
The implications of that are staggering. Just think about what that does to your civilization's baseline psychology. If every single citizen has spent a decade surviving ambushes, charting dead worlds, and living out of a hover-trike saddle, you no longer have a division between a soft civilian populace and a hardened military caste.
Precisely. There are no true non-combatants. The kin, who is repairing the plasma manifold on your ship, they spent 10 years scouting Tyranid vanguard organisms.
Yeah.
The technician calculating your next warp jump. They spent a decade evading orc hunting parties in an asteroid belt. When your entire population's formative years are defined by deep void survival, it completely calibrates the entire society's threat assessment.
It completely explains why they relish fighting against the odds. If your baseline for a normal Tuesday involves outrunning a plasma storm while being shot at by pirates, an impossible outnumbered battle doesn't induce panic.
It's just their comfort zone.
Exactly. They have bred a society of absolute survivalists. But if we dig a layer deeper, a question arises.
Okay, what's that?
You don't mandate a decade of brutal, high-casualty survival training just to build character. There has to be a foundational philosophical bedrock that justifies this level of perpetual suffering and attrition. Why are they so willing to be strung out?
And this leads us to the metaphysical core of the Trans-Hyperian Alliance.
Yeah.
Their unique interpretation of the cult of the ancestors. The driving force behind their ceaseless motion is not just wanderlust.
Right.
It is a fanatical, quasi-religious dedication to enriching their Votan.
Let's break down exactly what that means, because honoring the ancestors sounds like a standard religious platitude, right? Like burning incense or saying a prayer. But for the kin, it is a literal mechanical process.
Exactly. For the kin, the ancestors are not abstract spirits residing in some mystical afterlife. The consciousness, the memories, and the lived experiences of a kin are quite literally uploaded into the Votan upon their death.
Or periodically through the Fanes during their life, right?
Yeah, yes, exactly. The Votan is a gestalt consciousness of every kin who has ever lived. Therefore, to honor the ancestors is to provide the Votan with new, unique data. The Alliance practices this to a degree that other kin find deeply, deeply unsettling.
Yeah, they fill their Fanes with votive offerings, physical tokens of their travel, strange minerals, data drives of mapped anomalies.
Right. And other leagues look at this and see a profound waste of resources. Standard kin are pragmatists. You don't leave perfectly good materials sitting on a shrine.
No, you use them to build better guns.
Exactly. But the Alliance operates under a very strict, defining philosophy. Their central tenet is that honoring the ancestors is a transaction only of value, never of cost.
Okay, that phrase, a transaction only of value, never of cost. I have to challenge this philosophy directly.
Go for it.
Because when you look at the reality of their existence, it sounds like a massive coping mechanism.
It does sound like one, yeah.
How can they possibly claim there is never a cost? They are strung out, their scout ships are routinely blown out of the sky, entire expeditions are slaughtered, they live in the freezing void perpetually under strength.
Right.
From a purely objective standpoint, the cost of their lifestyle is astronomical in terms of blood and treasure. Are they just lying to themselves to justify the trauma?
It is entirely rational to view it as a coping mechanism from the outside, but to the Alliance, it is an absolute objective truth.
Yeah.
The friction here lies in how we define value and cost.
Okay, explain that.
For the pragmatic mainstream kin, cost is measured in material terms. The loss of a ship, the expenditure of rare munitions, the death of a skilled engineer. But the Alliance has decoupled their sense of worth from material wealth. For them, value is experiential data fed to the Votan.
So if a Hernkin Pioneer squad is ambushed and wiped out, that isn't a failure.
To the Alliance, no. It is a tragedy, certainly, but is not a cost. The telemetry of their destruction, the tactical data of the enemy weapons that killed them, the physiological stress markers of their heroic final moments, all of that data is transmitted back to the Fane and uploaded to the Votan.
So the Ancestor Core actually becomes wiser because of that encounter?
Exactly. The death was not a waste. It was a successful, albeit extremely violent, transaction of knowledge.
That is incredibly dark.
Oh, very.
They've essentially managed to monetize their own trauma and loss, turning horrific deaths into positive data points for their god machine. It reframes their entire existence.
It really does.
If the active gathering experience is the yield, then no expedition is ever a failure as long as the data transmits.
Which perfectly explains why they are willing to engage in conflicts that any other sane faction would flee from.
Right, because if this transaction of value philosophy is true, it shouldn't just be rhetoric. It should dictate how they behave on the battlefield.
And it does.
So do we see them actually throwing themselves into apocalyptic situations just for the sake of gathering data?
We absolutely do. The case studies of their military engagements read like a list of suicidal endeavors.
Let's look at the Rustfields War, for example. We have a massive, grinding conflict involving the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Orcs.
Yeah, two forces you do not want to be between.
Exactly. And the sheer environmental horror of fighting in a place called the Rustfields is bad enough. You're dealing with jagged, oxidized terrain, toxic storms, and a massive war of attrition.
It's a nightmare.
And right in the middle of this meat grinder, you have the Trans-Hyperian Alliance. They aren't there to conquer the Rustfields. They're there because there is some esoteric data core, some ancient archaeotech, or some rare mineral that they have deemed necessary for the Votan.
They will happily walk into a war zone between two of the most destructive forces in the galaxy just to make a deposit at the bank of knowledge.
It is the ultimate expression of their tactical audacity. And it is not an isolated incident. The records detail Kindred Hernal 7 waging a prolonged campaign against the Necrons.
Which is just mind-boggling.
Truly. You are dealing with an ancient, immortal race of living metal that utilizes weaponry capable of flaying targets at the molecular level.
Yeah, standard operational procedure when you find a sleeping Necron tomb world is to leave the sector immediately and pray they don't wake up.
Right. But the Alliance looks at a tomb world and sees an unparalleled repository of structural and chronomantic data. They are willing to test their void suits and Magna Rail rifles against molecular disassembler beams just to see what happens, because the telemetry of that fight is immensely valuable to the Ancestors.
Exactly. The risk is completely irrelevant if the data yield is high enough. But I think perhaps the most staggering example of this mentality in action is the Battle of Beta Decima.
Oh man, this incident is the pinnacle of their sheer, unadulterated arrogance.
It really is.
The Farsail of Thrick kindred detects an incoming splinter of Hive Fleet Leviathan. They are staring down the barrel of an extragalactic, world-consuming biological swarm. This is a threat that standard planetary governors respond to by initiating exterminatus, literally destroying their own planet just to deny the swarm the biomass.
Right, the only rational response to a Tyranid tendril is immediate evacuation or scorched earth denial.
But the Alliance detects this apocalyptic swarm heading toward Beta Decima, and their response is to try and trap it so they can harvest its resources.
I cannot overstate how insane that is.
They looked at a galaxy-ending biological horror and thought, you know, there are some incredibly rare exotic biocompounds in those ships, and the tactical data of engaging their vanguard organisms would look great in the Votan.
It perfectly encapsulates the transaction of value. A Tyranid invasion is not a doomsday event to them. It is a massive incoming delivery of exotic materials.
Free loot.
Essentially, yes.
The logistics of even attempting to trap a Hive Fleet splinter are staggering. Obviously, it did not go perfectly to plan. One of their scout ships was shot down early in the engagement by Genestealer cultists who were operating on the planet to pave the way for the swarm.
Right, so a trap got sprung early.
Exactly. This forced the kin into a desperate, grinding ground war. But the fact that they even initiated the operation proves that they apply their philosophy in the most extreme lethal scenarios imaginable.
And the only reason they can even survive these operations, the only reason they don't go entirely extinct within a year, is because their technological mastery is equal to their stubbornness.
Yeah, you have to back up that arrogance with some serious hardware.
Exactly. If you are going to willingly engage Tyranids and Necrons, your engineering cannot fail. And we see this technological brilliance highlighted in the story of Nothka's kindred.
Ah, the broken triplets.
Yes, the Broken Triplets is a region of space described as a calamitous ruin belt of 3 smashed worlds. 3 planetary bodies that have collided and shattered, creating a grinding, chaotic maelstrom of gravity shears, tectonic debris, and hard radiation.
This sounds lovely.
It's an environment that every other starfaring species considers completely inimical to life. It is fundamentally uninhabitable. And yet, Nothka's kindred maintains a permanent hold right in the middle of it.
When you think about the mechanics of how they achieve that, it is breathtaking. They don't just build thick walls, right? The environmental stresses of 3 colliding planets would crush adamantium like tinfoil.
Oh, nicely.
To survive there, kin engineers utilize a bulwark of interwoven force fields. We are talking about void shield phasing, overlapping kinetic barriers that have to perfectly dynamically calibrate against the shifting gravitational shear of the debris field.
The energy output required for that is just immense. They are likely tapping into the geothermal death throes of the planets themselves just to power the grid.
And the precision required. If one generator drops out of phase for a microsecond, the tidal forces would instantly turn their entire colony into diamond dust.
Yeah, they're essentially building a stable, habitable bubble inside a cosmic car crash.
Exactly. It demonstrates that if you are going to live as a nomad in the worst parts of the galaxy, you need to be able to build a campfire in a hurricane. They possess the technology to bend completely uninhabitable space to their will.
And that technological superiority extends to their voidcraft, which is arguably their most important asset. The kindred of Limitless Crag are famed across all the leagues as the master shipwrights of the swiftest voidcraft and atmospheric gunships.
Which makes perfect sense. If your entire civilization's survival, and the survival of your Votan, relies on evasion and speed, your shipwrights are your most critical defense contractors.
Without a doubt.
A standard kin vessel is usually heavily armored and slow, like a flying fortress, but the Alliance needs ships that can outrun a Tyranid bioship or evade a Necron pursuit fleet. The engines coming out of Luminous Crag have to be capable of absurd real space acceleration, pushing the inertial dampeners to the absolute limit.
Because if an engine stalls in the deep void, there is no backup. The Votan is lost.
So we have painted a picture of a society that is strung out, constantly outnumbered, willingly engaging with apocalyptic threats, and relying on incredibly advanced technology to maintain a razor-thin margin of survival. But how does this actually translate to the battlefield? When a conflict inevitably devolves into a ground war, how does a constantly outnumbered, strung-out faction actually win? They cannot rely on the standard kin doctrine of static heavy attrition.
No, they can't. Brings us perfectly to their combat doctrine. The tabletop game actually represents their unique approach to warfare through a specific rule called the Nomad Strategist trait.
Okay, let's analyze how this tabletop mechanic translates into their actual lore and
So
tactics.
the Nomad Strategist trait allows a commander to redeploy up to 3 units at the absolute start of the first battle round, after deployment, but before the fighting begins.
If we translate that into the narrative of a battlefield, it is a devastating tactical advantage.
Oh, completely.
Imagine a massive, sprawling war zone. The enemy commander has spent hours meticulously deploying their forces. They have committed their heavy armor to the left flank, preparing for a massive breakthrough. They have set their artillery lines. They have committed to their opening strategy. And then, right before the first shot is fired, the Trans-Hyperian alliance instantly, fluidly rearranges their entire battle line. The units the enemy thought were pinned down are suddenly gone. The armor on the left flank is now facing empty ground, while the Kin's heavy weapons have instantly repositioned to strike the enemy's exposed command structure.
It is the weaponization of adaptability. They do not fight static battles. They observe the enemy's deployment gathering data, as always, and then they adapt instantly. It is highly fluid, nomadic warfare.
They absolutely refuse to be pinned down.
Right, because they know that in a war of sheer attrition, they will run out of bodies long before the enemy does.
It requires an unbelievable level of discipline and communication. To execute a mass redeployment of heavy infantry and gunships in the chaotic moments before a battle begins means their command and control network has to be flawless.
It really does. It
Yes.
perfectly represents a culture that survives on extreme cunning rather than sheer brute force.
And it ties all of their cultural elements together, doesn't it? The survival instincts of the Hernken pioneers, the swift technology of the Luminous Crag shipwrights, and the data-obsessed calculations of the ancestor cult all culminate in this fluid, elusive style of war.
It really is a perfect synthesis of their lore.
But when you synthesize all of these elements, the incredible technology, the tactical brilliance, the sheer courage of exploring the dark, you arrive at a truth that the lore itself describes as deeply sobering.
Yeah.
When you step back and look at the totality of the Trans-Hyperian Alliance, this is not a triumphant space opera about glorious explorers taming the stars.
No, not at all. It is fundamentally a story of self-imposed exile. They have traded the comfort, the security, and the stability of a stationary home for the freezing expanse of the void.
Right.
And they did it out of a noble desire to protect their sleeping ancestors.
They are trapped by their own nobility. Their desperate need to keep the Votans safe and to constantly enrich it with new data has condemned their entire civilization to a life of perpetual hardship. The pursuit of knowledge, for them, is not liberating. It is a heavy, unbreakable chain. It demands ceaseless sacrifice. They can never settle down. They can never rest.
Because if they stop moving, their defense fails. If they stop exploring, the flow of data to the Votan ceases, meaning they are failing their gods. It's a tragic paradox.
Yeah.
They're the most brilliant explorers in the galaxy, but they are prisoners of their own momentum.
We have covered incredible ground today. We started by examining how they completely inverted the methodical, defensive nature of the kin to become these obsessed, void-faring nomads.
Yeah, we looked at the sheer logistical madness of putting their most precious Votan on moving ships and how they protect them with the biosympathetic encryption of the Scrambled Knowledge Protocol.
We analyzed the sociological weight of the Hernken pioneers, recognizing how mandating a decade of frontier survival shapes a society that relishes being strung out and outnumbered.
We dug deeply into the terrifying logic of their ancestor cult, the belief that every death and disaster is merely a transaction of data.
Right, which is the only philosophy that explains their willingness to fight Necrons in the Rust Fields, or their staggering audacity in attempting to mine a Tyranid invasion force at Beta Decima.
Finally, we saw how this all manifests in their fluid, highly adaptable combat doctrine, allowing them to survive in a universe that actively wants them dead, even as they endure the tragic reality of their self-imposed exile.
It is a phenomenal piece of world building that forces you to reconsider what survival actually looks like. But it leaves me with one final, deeply unsettling thought about the true nature of their existence.
And this is the question you, as the listener, should take with you as you reflect on this faction. We have established that the Alliance feeds every experience, every victory, and every agonizing death into the Votan as experiential data.
Right.
If a civilization's entire existence, its culture, its warfare, its daily survival becomes wholly dedicated to gathering data for a machine god, at what point does the biological culture they are trying to protect cease to exist?
Oh,
If every sacrifice is ultimately just a telemetry update, and every citizen is bred to be an expendable scout, are they truly a living, breathing civilization anymore? Or have they simply become the universe's most dedicated biological data-gathering tools, serving a cold machine that will never let them rest?
It certainly makes you wonder who is actually driving the ship into the dark. Thank you for taking this journey into the void with us. Keep questioning the world around you, and we will see you on the next deep dive.